Hey, folks, Tim Miller here. And this is part two today to a podcast we did earlier with my friend Jeff Rice. And I will introduce him here very shortly, reintroduce him, I should say. For many of you, you have met him. But this is what the topic is about today. I know every time I watch that video of the attack in Las Vegas, it strikes horror in my heart. I know for all of us, as we watch the news, we really couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe that death at that scale could happen in the U.S. Certainly, we learned on 9/11 that death can come quickly. But this was personal. This was a sniper, and I'm so honored to have my friend and Lionheart team member Jeff Rice with us. Jeff won't brag on himself, and I'm going to put a link to the original video, down in the comments section. But let me just say this about Jeff. Jeff's a real life action hero. Jeff's been with the Secret Service, served on the President's Detail, the Crisis Action Team, is a trained sniper, retired as a federal agent. His last assignments were with ATF in LA. Great place to be. Collecting some of the worst people in terms of violent criminals. And so Jeff has been there, done that. And yet Jeff is, a person like you and I that has a life apart from his profession. And in this particular case, was at the concert with his wife off duty. Probably the most highly skilled tactical person I know. And yet didn't have his equipment, didn't have, the folks around him, didn't have armored vehicles, didn't have any of the tools. So he had to respond. And I think, folks, listen to me very carefully. These kinds of events are going to happen more and more and more in the U.S. We saw in New Orleans just one attack of what I believe are going to be many in the US. And so why do I do these videos? It's so that you and I can be prepared, that we don't just think about it. This was not a movie. It wasn't a Hollywood thing. It was real life. Jeff found himself in the middle of what I would describe hell with a sniper trying to kill as many people as he could. And so I hope today, folks, you get some things out of this that will help you stay safe in public venues, that will help you think through, what would I do with a sniper? Many of us don't think about a sniper. We think about street crime. We think about now, especially vehicles, but a sniper's a whole different thing. And so, Jeff, I'm so honored to have you. As always, brother, you're a quiet professional, and I'm just honored to be teamed with you. And so, Jeff, just for the audience, just take us back to that day again. I'll let them, review the video from before, which I learned so much about. But just take us back to that day and what you were thinking as you were in that concert.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me back, Tim. I really appreciate it, brother. It's good to be here. So to come back to that day, it was a 3-day concert. Days 1 and 2, and most of day 3 were actually really, really fun. We had a great time. But that evening, I was with my wife, and we'd entered the venue, and we were moving around, watching. There's a couple different concerts going on obviously, like we discussed previously, on opposite ends of the concert. We're at one end watching Luke Combs for most of the evening, and then made our way over to where Jason Aldean was ultimately going to end up playing, where the actual shooting event happened. We found our spot where we were going to be just by circumstance. It wasn't anything that was planned. Like we talked about, it's more of a creature comfort thing of where to be just for access to the bathrooms and things like that. But we ended up where we were, and then the shooting started.
Yeah. Jeff, obviously you're a trained professional. You shared with me before our last video that one of the things you did in the Secret Service is they shot different weapons, different directions, so you could identify calibers. And so you talk to me about, you recognized the fire pretty immediately. What did that cause you to do and think right at that instant?
The initial fire, it was just a few rounds, like 5 rounds. The very, very, very first rounds, I wasn't 100% sure where it's coming from. I thought it may be a drive, might have been a drive-by, just because it is Las Vegas. But then after those first few rounds, I really started to pay attention, like where's this coming from? And I could just hear the rounds coming over my head. And that was really my first indication that it really probably wasn't ground level
Hmm.
attack.
Interesting.
I could hear them snap over my head. Instead of going like hitting the ground in front of me or going by me, I mean, they were popping right above my head. So at that point, I was like, man, this is a sniper situation. And
Wow.
I wasn't sure exactly where it was coming from, but I knew it was elevated at that point. Maybe a minute after the first rounds came. So it was relatively quickly, but not quickly enough, I guess you would say, because I wasn't thinking that, and there's going to be a sniper at a concert.
Yeah, boy, that's a great takeaway, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you'd known, you'd have definitely not gone to that concert.
No, sir, I wouldn't have.
But it's interesting that you trained. I mean, there was probably nobody in the crowd as well trained as you are, but you instantly recognize it. But even in your professional with your training, it took you a couple, a few seconds to orient. And I think the last video you said you grabbed your wife and pushed her to the ground and began yelling to other folks, get down.
Yes, I put her on the ground pretty, as soon as the first round came over, she was on the ground. And then I was yelling at everybody, hey, get down, somebody's shooting at us. And everybody, not most, everybody was like, no, that's just fireworks. You think, oh, it's just fireworks. You look up and there's no fireworks explosions going on. So I don't know why they were thinking that, but they were. And I'm
Yeah.
yelling at them, no, this is gunfire. We need to get down. We need to get down for a minute. And unfortunately, the people right in front of me and some behind me were shot and killed.
I saw that video again. In that video, I saw people standing, staring, and looking around. One of the things we train, Jeff, I know you train with us, is the most important thing you can have in a crisis is previous mental training and preparation. And obviously we train, as you know, we train normalcy bias,
Right.
because normalcy bias is it's in every person. Tells you, no, it's okay, there's nothing going on, nothing to see here. And the reason that it does that is because it's the brain's defense against triggering fight, flight, or freeze, and adrenaline rush. And normally you hear a car backfire, and normalcy bias doesn't tell you it's a shot. It says, it's probably nothing. In this case, normalcy bias killed a lot of people. And we always encourage in our training, our corporate training, never trust normalcy bias. Always let the facts,
Right.
communicate to you. And it was tragic just watching in the lead in video how many people died because they simply didn't react. They didn't believe it was real. One of the things in normalcy bias that we talk about is an incident that happened on a plane where a plane caught on fire and literally on the runway, and only a few people got out of their seats and made it to the exits in time, because they were sitting there. Folks that survived were walking, running by people saying, go, go, go. But the normalcy bias
Right.
froze them in place. So that would be number one for any of you listening. We've got to always treat what's happening through the lens of let the facts speak for themselves. Let what you see happening determine what you see or how you respond. And so that's really good. And I know we talked earlier, Jeff, about you got down on the ground and then you made a quick assessment. Talk to me about the things you were assessing before you begin to take actions.
Really, I think there were two things initially that I was trying to assess at that point. Is one, where in the heck is this actually coming from? And two, I was looking around saying, okay, I can't stay here. I'm going to get killed. There's already people that have been killed here, and the fire's still happening. Where's my closest cover or concealment? And how am I going to get there? Those were the immediate two things. I can't stay here. I've got to move. Where am I going? And I wish
And
I would have picked that out
beforehand.
before the concert started.
Yeah.
That was a mistake on my part. I should have done that. Uh, so I was severely behind the eight ball at this point, and I'm trying to make up ground. This mental makeup, I guess, which is hard to do when there's hundreds of bullets being shot at you.
Yeah.
And luckily, I was able to spot a piece of cover, which we ultimately ended up making our way to, which saved our lives.
Brother, that's such a great word. I appreciate your humility too, because you're a trained warrior, and yet you assumed
Yes,
that everything would be okay, that, oh, the venue has security. I saw in the video a police officer with a vest on, running by. And so it's easy for us to assume they've got it covered, isn't it?
it is.
Yeah. But thank God, you had the presence of mind to go, okay, now it's training kick-in time. And so, the normalcy bias, but then the quick assessment. And the assessment, folks, for all of us needs to occur before the incident happens. Where are our exits? You hear this all the time from me. I'll go over it because I'm a little slow. Where are the exits and entrances? For those that identify a second exit or entrance to get out of, and when a crisis happens, their survival goes up 90% because they're not going back to where all the crowd goes. They've identified other exits. The second thing is what are people doing? In this case, it would have been hard to identify a sniper, but you wherever you go, watch people's body language, pay attention to what they're doing because they can, it can give you information that can save your life. The third is where is cover and concealment? In this case, Jeff absolutely identified it, was able to get to it, and it clearly saved his life as the sniper started focusing on that cover and concealment had he not had that. And then the fourth thing is what's my plan to get out? How do we plan to get out? Well, Jeff talked about he moved into a place because it looked like a good spot to be. And I know we've talked about this offline. As much as I can now, when I go into restaurants, when I go into whatever, I want to be back to the door facing any entrances or exits, but also having a plan. How do I get my wife and myself or my grandkids or whoever? How do I get out of here?
Right.
Uh, so Jeff, back to you made your assessment and you decided to do something with I think is profoundly heroic, and I'm amazed. You decided to help a wounded person while still under fire. You talk to me about that decision process.
Um, Honestly, it just boiled down to, I think, just simple humanity.
Hmm.
Like, this guy was hurt. I wasn't. I had, you know, some medical training from, previous jobs. It turned out not to be enough, with the wounds that he had. But, I figured I was just going to take him with me, uh, and just couldn't leave him there.
So yeah, the bottom line is, you made a decision to help others, and you knew what to do. You had training to do it. I want to pause here for a second. We touched on this very briefly, but talk to me about the things in the middle of the storm that you had trained, prepared ahead of time that enabled you to succeed under the most horrific circumstances.
Well, I think the very first one, I think one of the more important ones is, sort of what we call, control your mind and body, uh,
Hmm.
which is basically thinking about things like, if X, Y, or Z were to happen, what would I do? Now, I've thought about those in many, many other circumstances. Um,
Hmm.
and, I think I somewhat thought about that during this event. One of the things we talked about previously was, upon entrance, I was like, hey, this is the only exit to this place. So if something happens, I'm not going to be able to leave from here. And I think that sort of led down the line of, or two, as I was walking around the venue, I was sort of noticing, hey, here's places where workers are bringing garbage in and out, potential exit. Um, you know, Here's another potential exit where they're taking stuff in and out. Not an entrance, official pedestrian entrance, but something that could be used to get out. So I
Hmm.
think, you know, thinking about those things sort of goes towards that control your mind and your body a little bit. you know, just if X, Y, or Z were to happen, what am I going to do? Now, I clearly never thought there was going to be a sniper there, so that never came into
Right.
my head. So
Right.
that's one aspect.
So, Jeff, let me just pivot a little bit on that, because you and I talked about this. Some of our audience are their security, their law enforcement, and we all know. You and I know from the Secret Service, you got to be fit, you got to be strong, you got to be, got to be, got to be. Talk to me about the critical importance of physical fitness and drill down a little bit for that. Maybe that person that's working in security, they're not taking, maybe their workout time as much as, seriously as they should. Talk to me about the critical importance of physical fitness, because most people have not lived what you've lived through unless you've been in the military
Right.
or you have some kind of law enforcement experience like this.
Well, first off, these events are the most violent thing you'll ever be a part of, even if you're not shot. It is still extremely violent. I had cuts, bruises, things that showed up a couple of days later that I didn't even know happened.
Hmm.
Um, so physical fitness is crucially or critically important, because you're going to have to be picking your loved ones up off the ground or putting them on the ground. You're going to have to be moving them with one arm. You may have to throw them over your shoulder and be able to carry them. You may have to carry a wounded person, like I had to do, while jumping over a fence, like a bike rack or a little higher sized thing, and flipping somebody over a fence at the same time. Cardiovascularly, you have to be, that's important as well. You have to be cardiovascularly fit, because some of these, you may have to go a long way to get to this cover, and you're not going in a straight line. You're going to be zigzagging, and I mean, you're adding meters or feet to where, your route. But I mean, you just, you have to be physically fit. I'm not talking, Mr. Olympia bodybuilding stuff,
Right.
you know, but
Right.
functional fitness, I think, is critically important for everybody.
So talk to me. I mean, you're not a young buck anymore. You're
No.
you're younger than me, but I noticed you and I talked about this. I try to be in the gym 6 days a week. tell me about what your weekly routine, I don't need sets and all that, but
Right.
give me an idea of how do you prepare for what you experienced, especially after you experienced it?
Well, my, I guess, daily routines are, at least lifting weights 4 days a week and having cardio an additional three.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then.
How about firearms training? How much firearms training do you try to accomplish?
Uh, right now, I mean, since I just moved, it was, I just
Mhm.
found somewhere where I can do it.
Right.
I'd like to go once a week if I can.
Right. Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
way different than shooting every day like we used to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. Obviously, like you, I'm a firearms instructor and I've trained a long time. I am shocked how quickly your skills deplete,
Yes.
and let me just say this to folks that, have some level of weapons training. I have to be careful what I say, but let me just encourage you folks. Now is the time to train, train, and train some more. And don't just train with static targets. I often say I've been training firearms a long time, and so far I've not had a paper target shoot back at me. It is critically important that you are training tactically, training how to move, training combat reloads, training how to fire from different positions, because it may not work out where it's a perfect, gun, fight or draw,
Right.
and so that's just a great takeaway. In this case, you didn't have that tool, and you had to make do with what you have, which leads me to the next question. Obviously, this didn't happen in 2 minutes.
No.
It went on for how long? And how did you deal with mental and physical exhaustion because you're operating at an adrenaline level that's driving your heart rate through the roof? How did you deal with that?
Yeah. It went on for, I don't know, maybe 13 to 15 minutes, which seemed a lot longer than that at the time.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, I think going back to physical fitness,
Yeah.
first of all, I didn't get as tired as I probably would have if, I wasn't relatively fit at the time.
Hmm.
Um, like you mentioned, adrenaline, like
Right.
that's pumping and pumping and pumping. But there were lulls in the fire here and there. And you did have some little dump, or at least I did. Like you would feel that little adrenaline dump, and you're like, man, I'm getting a little tired right now. And then it would start up again. Boom! Now it's way back up. So is that up and down, up and down? I think just being physically fit, first of all, was important, and secondly, I go back to that control your mind and body.
Yeah.
I mean, there's things to think about during those during the lulls in the fire, and I use that
Right.
opportunity to not let my mind get away, but to think about, okay, here's where we are. Here's what's happening. What can I do to improve the situation? So staying calm,
Yeah. No, that's good. Go ahead.
yeah, staying calm, assessing constantly what's happening, and how can I make this better for me and the group that was with me is really what was going through my head the entire time.
We've talked about this. The box breathing. I know you train it as well as we do, keeping the airflow going,
Right.
because without the airflow, you're in trouble. But also that positive self-talk, which is, I think, what you just talked about. Hey, we're going to be okay. How do I get everybody out of here? Because we also know neurologically that affects performance. If you're like, oh no, I'm going to die, you could be right.
Right.
Versus, hey, we're going to get through this. Even speaking those words out are helpful, because it's a panic killer when you begin to say, I can do this, we're going to do this, come on, we're going to be okay. it kills panic, which is profoundly impacting to me how you were able to do that, because it's one thing if there's a flurry of gunshots, people are down, you're in a bad situation, and then it stops and you gotta, but you went through this for 15 minutes, ultimately fleeing, out of that area into a building where I think, according to your last, video, you were told, hey, they're coming through and
Right.
trying to kill people. So now you literally transition from an outdoor venue into an indoor venue. You've got people that you collected along the way, which
Mhm.
is a great, amazing thing. And you were able to protect them. So when did you really feel like, okay, this thing is starting to wind down?
It had to be a couple of hours after the
Wow.
initial shots. So it was a very, very prolonged thing.
Wow.
Um, it covered, from the event, all the way down to the Hooters Casino and Hotel. I mean, which is a pretty good distance,
Right.
to move throughout that whole entire event. And, thinking you're in a safe spot, and then to be told that, no, it's coming this way now.
My
So, you
goodness.
talk about that adrenaline dump. Like when we first got in there, like everything dumped, and adrenaline was. And then to hear it's coming back into the hotel was just like crushing.
That wasn't the hotel he was in, though,
No, he
right?
was in the Mandalay.
Yeah. So when you heard, possibly, they were coming back in, was there not casino security? No, was anybody inside of the hotel thinking about that?
No,
Or
only people that had come there from the concert.
wow,
Yeah, there was no
wow,
staff to be seen anywhere.
was it chaotic in there?
Believe it or not, it was not. I mean, people were upset and crying, and some of them were injured. Uh,
Mm,
but it wasn't chaos, because I think people were like, we just got out of the worst experience of our life.
right.
But it wasn't chaotic.
Wow. So Jeff, everything winds down, and just going back, that whole normalcy bias thing we talked about.
Yeah.
That's a huge takeaway, and then your mental assessment. In the midst of it, you're having to assess again and again and again, and the only way you can do that is by controlling your breathing and speaking encouragement. I'm just amazed, Jeff, how you were able to lead others, from the venue where people were being murdered into the hotel. Again, set up a security effort there. It kind of reinforces that whole speaking, calm in the middle of panic, but also tactically thinking. And what am I going to do? How am I going to, protect? Okay, I was over there. I call it the Jason Bourne syndrome. you know, you're moving from one high
Yeah.
intensity thing to another, but it really speaks to your resilience, your training, and quite frankly, your commitment. And so now everything winds down
Hmm.
and the adrenaline starts coming down. It really is over. Talk to me about your journey after that.
Well, in the immediate aftermath of that, we were still in Las Vegas.
Hmm.
So, one of our friends who lives there actually ended up picking us up, and we had to walk a little bit of distance to meet them, but getting us off the strip back
Hmm.
to their house, which was in
Mm.
Henderson. Um, and that's honestly, when I got to their house, that's when the holy crap, this just
Yeah.
happened hit me.
Wow.
And,
Wow. Mm.
I just remember sitting there going, I can't believe that we're still alive.
Mm.
And, I was covered in blood. And the first thing I didn't have any clothes, a change of clothes, obviously, and I was covered in blood. And the first thing I honestly wanted to wash the nasty. I wanted to wash that concert off me. So I'm like, can I please take a shower? And do you have a change of clothes that I could borrow? I just wanted to remove what just happened off of me, you know. hoping maybe that would calm me down a little bit. And so, I did that, and I'm just sitting. I just remember sitting in that shower, standing in the shower, like shaking a little bit, like, oh
Yeah.
my, you know, like I'm so fortunate to be alive.
Yeah. I think
And
God
it's probably
God's
two thirty
secretly.
three in the morning.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry, it's probably 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Hmm.
And yeah, I just went. My wife was there, obviously, at the house with me, and I just went to their backyard and sat down by their pool and just sat there. And I don't even know what I was thinking about until the sun came up. I was still in shock. I think that this really just happened to us. So that was immediately what happened.
That's like the worst nightmare in you wake up, you hope you're gonna wake up from that nightmare.
Yeah,
Uh, well, I know, you shared with me very personally shortly after that, just the struggle to process that, and, I know all of our military veterans understand,
yeah,
that, and police officers and heroes like you can go through it and really, really do an amazing job, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't impact you. And so talk to me about, as much you feel
yeah,
comfortable about, okay, the journey is over in terms of the tactical. You're going into your ATF special agent mode of, hey, I gotta process that. But then you get to the personal. You're at the house. It's hitting you, and then talk to me about that point forward, to where I think we talked shortly after you had an encounter with a former SEAL.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, could you talk? Because I'm sure that will help a lot of people.
So like we talked previously. Yeah, I was scheduled to help this Navy SEAL Buds candidate with his pistol qualification. He was having trouble with it, so I had already agreed to meet. This was before the concert. I agreed to meet him, the day after I got back. Um, so after the concert and everything happened, I was like, well, I made this promise, and so I'm still going to commit to it. Uh, Fast forward, while we're at the range, I'm waiting for him back to the range where we were. Uh, the police department's range, their SWAT team showed up and they were getting ready to start to shoot. And I didn't know that they were, and then their M4 started going off, and I hit the deck, crawled under the car, and I was right back in Las Vegas in my mind. My
Mm,
buddy was, like I said, I'll never forget. Dragged me out from under the car, gave me a hug, picked me up, said, "Hey, brother, it's going to be okay."
yeah,
And that's, I mean, granted, it was just a day later, but
yeah,
it was still real.
yeah,
Yes, so some people it could take a year for that to hit them. So I mean, it was literally the next day for me, because I just still think I was there in my head. Um, so that happened, and that's when I realized that, man, like this is still going on in my head. Things are not all okay. Um, and I sort of let it go for a little bit, but then it started to sort of impact life a little, at home and at work a little bit. So, and the ATF was great with, the counseling they provided for me and my wife, more importantly, for her. They were wonderful. And we did all of those, sessions that they wanted us to do. And I thought that was wonderful. And every agency should do that. I don't know if they do, but the ATF was fantastic on that. Um, they were really, really good. But as time went on, other things in life happen that
mm,
compound to this, right?
mm-hmm,
And I finally just realized that this was impacting not just this event, but this was a great part of probably what was going on. And one of my buddies in the Naval Special Warfare community told me about this program that, it was for veterans and law enforcement officers and first responders as a whole, that, they work with you to, the best way to put it, uh, with the electrical impulses in your brain and through, diet and supplements of ways to help people that have been in violent situations get better mentally more quickly. And so I took advantage of that program.
So proud of you, dude. Because many of our colleagues,
Right.
they don't process it, and especially in the military, the suicide rate is off the chart, but also in law enforcement.
Yeah.
You know, would you mind mentioning that organization? Is that something you
Yeah.
could mention?
It's called Vitania,
Okay,
Vitanya.
okay. And you were sharing with me what was cool about that is they were all peers. They were all special ops folks that had experience in that community.
Right.
Um, and that's fascinating to me because you and I know if, and for those listening that are in the military or have been in law enforcement, we tend to trust those who have similar experiences.
Correct.
And so, just really so proud of you, brother, that
Well,
you had
thank
the
you.
courage. I know we can, as warriors, tend to go, "I'll be okay," or if you admit you're struggling, that you're weak. But it's actually the opposite. If you admit you're struggling, you get help, then you become an even stronger warrior.
Yeah. And, I'll even go as far as to say, like, my teammates were so supportive. There was none of this, hey man, what's wrong with you?
Yeah,
Not at all. They're like, I'm any way I can help you with this, let me know. And I would even throw this out to your audience. If you're a teammate of somebody that is going through something like that, please be supportive of them
yeah.
and encourage them. If you're a husband or a wife of somebody that's going through this, please encourage them to seek this out and
Yeah.
help them through the process, because that is the path towards fixing what's going on in your head, not running
Such
from it.
such a huge encouragement, Jeff. That and from someone who's lived through that. I think I know you were a police officer as well as I.
Yeah.
I think every cop, has to deal with this kind. Not certainly not what you lived through, but we've all been there right after, the suicides or the violent incidents or whatever.
Right.
And it's just so huge. I love that you were transparent and humble enough to say, I know when we talked on the phone, you were like, look, dude, that transformed my life. I went
Did.
from being irritable and, blah, 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 which we all can relate. And by the way, alcohol doesn't seem to help it.
No,
You know,
the wrong thing to do.
yeah, kind of going the wrong way.
Yeah.
Well, brother, this is so helpful. I'm so grateful. Just some takeaways for all of us, as we think about, man, what would I do if I find myself in a violent incident? Just the normalcy bias, allowing, being alert, aware, putting your phone away, allowing your, what you're seeing to determine whether it's real or not normalcy bias, that assessment, mental assessment.
Yeah.
That, by the way, we talk about this a lot, Jeff, in our training when we're training corporations, the whole OODA loop:
Yep.
observe, orient, decide, act. That's an ongoing mental process that if you practice it, you get real good at it. And so the assessment, and then obviously the ability to, amidst the most horrible, type of circumstances, to move deliberately, take control of your mind and body with box breathing, and also with speaking out, we're going to be okay. You save lives doing that. But then the tactical, the physical fitness part, and here's the good news: all the things we've just talked about, now you're hearing from a top tier guy what happened in a real circumstance. And so, folks, if you don't take these lessons and begin, okay, let me think about that. How do I, deal with mental alertness? And well, you put your phone away. You begin to scan. You begin to train your mind to see things normally you wouldn't. Brain's an amazing thing. But then for each of these takeaways, I really want to encourage you. How can I do this? It's great to hear Jeff's story. But at the end of the day, that's not going to save you. Jeff's story is not going to prepare you to save your family unless you take the lessons that we just talked about. And remember, folks, that's the whole purpose of this channel. I'm not a big YouTube person. I just love helping people prepare. That's what our company does. We help people prepare for crisis. We train them so that you don't have to be the ones that are standing there looking around screaming it's fireworks. You're the other folks like Jeff that have a skill set that's going to save yourself, your family, and others. So Jeff, thank you as always, brother. I'm so
Yeah, brother.
honored. I'm really honored that you're on our team. I have so much respect for you. And folks, let me just encourage you. I say this every time because it's true. I'm not at the top of this platform's like list, and I haven't, about 11,000 followers. Many never see anything that I do. So help me with the algorithm by liking, sharing, subscribing. Can I challenge you, if you know a police officer, you know a military person, please forward this. Please give them the link. I'll put Jeff's initial video, which was amazing, and this one, I'll put that in the links below. But please, folks, let's get the message out. And I'm not a doom and gloomer. I'm not a fear spreader. I will tell you, listen to me. We're going to see things in the U.S. in 2025 that we've never seen in our lifetime. New Orleans started day one. We're going to see many more of these kinds of attacks. And unfortunately, most people are not prepared. And so my hope and prayer is that you're not most people, that you are the people that's prepared, that are, that you're prepared, you're trained, you're skilled, you're physically fit, because we want to make a difference. So I hope this is helpful for you. I hope if you like, share, comment, love to hear your comments. Jeff will be looking at the comments as well. And I just want to say thank you to this audience. You guys are great. I mean, you always send encouraging messages, and I hope and pray this is helpful. So until we see you next time, please be safe out there. God bless you.
Thanks, brother.
Okay. Wait a minute here.